The grand hall of the Calirian Empire shimmered with the light of 1,000 chandeliers suspended in anti-gravity fields, their crystalline bodies refracting the blues and golds of the imperial banners. Rows of dignitaries stood at attention on the polished obsidian floor, all waiting for the moment their empress would remind the galaxy of its order, Caliria first, forever. At the heart of this theater, on a throne carved from a single slab of black starstone, Empress Valerian IX sat poised, her silver eyes fixed on the empty section of the floor reserved for the human delegation. Her fingers tapped once on the armrest, an uncharacteristic gesture for a ruler whose patience was considered infinite. "They are late," murmured Chancellor THRYX, leaning in. "Perhaps they've reconsidered attending." The Empress did not glance at him. Humans have no concept of protocol. They will arrive. And when they do, they will understand their place. For centuries, the Calirian Empire had been the sole galactic hegemon. Even the mighty Kair Dominion and the fractious SYTH coalition bent knee to Calirian authority. Humanity, a newly spacefaring species from an unremarkable spiral arm, was expected to do the same. After minor skirmishes on Calirian border colonies, the Empire had summoned Earth to the Imperial Grand Summit under the guise of negotiations. Everyone in the hall knew this was not a discussion, it was a ceremony of submission. At last, the heavy doors parted. The humans entered without fanfare, no ceremonial guard, no gifts, no ornamental attire. Just 6 individuals in dark, understated uniforms, walking in precise formation. The leader, Ambassador Elise Vance, carried no datapad, no translator device. The Empress regarded them with cool disdain. "You are late." Ambassador Vance inclined her head slightly. "We are here." The chamber seemed to grow colder. "Let us begin," the Empress said, her voice carrying the subtle chime of authority that made most beings instinctively lower their gaze. "The Calirian Empire has tolerated your trespasses along our borders for long enough. You will return all disputed territories, dismantle your military presence beyond Sol, and pay reparations for the damages inflicted upon Imperial citizens." There was a pause. Ambassador Vance's lips curved into something that was not quite a smile. "We came here today to discuss peace. But it seems we're here to receive orders instead." A ripple of amusement ran through the assembled dignitaries. The Empress's gaze sharpened. "You misunderstand, human. These are not orders. These are terms for your continued existence." The human delegation exchanged quiet glances, a wordless communication. Then Vance stepped forward and set a small projection device on the obsidian floor. A holographic image flared to life above it, deep space, framed by the swirling gas of a nebula. And then, movement. One after another, massive warships emerged from the nebula's shadow. Each was unlike anything in the Empire's archives, angular, bristling with weapon systems of unknown design, their hull shimmering with a defensive lattice that bent light itself. The first dozen formed a wall. Then 2 dozen. Then hundreds. And still they came. The Empress felt the first flicker of unease when the count passed 1,000. The projection shifted to show them in formation, 3,000 warships, each radiating power signatures beyond the capacity of Imperial sensors to fully read. Every one of them bore the same insignia, the blue and gold crest of the Terran Defense Armada. In the hushed chamber, someone whispered, "Impossible." Vance's voice was calm, conversational, almost too soft for the vast hall. 3,000 ships. Fully crewed, fully armed. Each equipped with technologies the Empire has yet to develop. They have been assembled quietly over the past 2 decades undetected, because we wished it so. The Empress straightened in her throne. An intimidation display? You think showing me stolen imagery will? Vance cut her off, her tone still mild but edged with steel. This is not imagery. This is a live feed. They are here. At those words, the hologram zoomed out, revealing that the fleet hung in real space just beyond the Calirian border, their weapons locked outward. In the background, distant Imperial outposts blinked on sensors, completely surrounded. An audible shift swept through the court. Advisors stiffened. Generals' hands twitched toward their columns. The Empress's heartbeat slowed, a deliberate act of will, but she could not deny the faint pressure in her chest. She had faced rebellions, assassinations, even the near collapse of the Outer Rim. But never had another species stood before her throne with such unshakable composure while holding the power to annihilate entire fleets in a single volley. Vance let the silence stretch before speaking again. "We did not come to threaten you. We came to offer peace. A peace between equals. But let us be clear, we will never again come unprepared." It was a calculated phrase, never again, hinting at past human weakness, now gone forever. The Empress's advisors pressed close, their voices low and urgent. "We must not let this stand, prepare the fleets, we can still outmaneuver them." But Valerian barely heard them. Her gaze remained fixed on the holographic wall of steel and fire. She could see it in the formation, the precision, the discipline. These were not a ragtag fleet built in desperation. This was a planned revelation, a weapon forged in secret for the sole purpose of redefining the balance of power. Her fingers curled slightly against the throne's armrest. The gesture did not go unnoticed. In all her reign, no one had seen her falter. And now, before the entire court, the smallest crack had appeared. When she finally spoke, her voice was quieter than before, not weak, but sharpened. "We will discuss terms." Vance inclined her head once more. "That is all we ever asked." The projection faded, leaving the grand hall dimmer than before, the lingering image of 3,000 warships burning into every mind present. For the first time in living memory, the Calirian Empire had been reminded it was not eternal. And Empress Valerian IX, the unshakable, the untouchable, sat upon her throne, and knew that something in her galaxy had shifted forever. The throne room of Empress Xeris was a cathedral of starlight. Transparent walls of diamond glass opened to the view of the Empire's capital world, where a planet-wide city glimmered beneath the pale arcs of its twin moons. The Empress herself, draped in layered silks of violet and gold, sat rigid on her seat of fused crystal, her eyes like molten copper. Humanity's delegation stood before her, 3 men, 2 women, all wearing plain uniforms marked with a single insignia, a small silver star over a black field. No ornament, no armor, no armed escort. She looked at them as one might look at curiosities in a market stall. "You are far from your little cradle, humans," she said, her voice carrying the faintest curl of amusement. "Do you know why you were summoned?" Ambassador Darius Holt stepped forward, his expression unreadable. "We assumed this was to discuss the release of our captured scouts." The Empress smiled thinly. "Scouts? Spies, you mean? You send your fragile ships into the Orion expanse, my territory, without leave. You were caught. Now you stand here because I allow it." Around the chamber, the assembled nobles and admirals murmured agreement. Humanity was small, untested, not yet fully integrated into the web of galactic politics. A species barely a century into starflight had no business in the expanse, the heart of the Calirian Empire. "I should have your colonies dismantled," Xeris continued. "I should." Holt interrupted. Not rudely, but firmly. "Before you decide what you should do, I'd like to show you something." One of the humans, a woman with short-cropped hair and eyes the color of ice, stepped forward and placed a thin hexagonal device on the floor. It rose into the air and began to hum, projecting an image into the open space above the chamber's center. At first, it was only darkness, a wide field of stars. Then the image shifted, and shapes emerged. Massive shapes. The nobles leaned forward. The Empress frowned. Dozens of warships drifted into view, their hulls matte black, their profiles angular and predatory. But their configuration was strange. Old. Their designs resembled nothing from the current age. The feed widened, and more ships appeared, hundreds, then thousands, fanning out across the field of vision. By the time the count reached 3,000, a prickling sensation had crept up the Empress's spine. "These are not in our registry," muttered Admiral Sarion, his voice tight. "No," Holt agreed calmly. "They wouldn't be." Xeris narrowed her eyes. "Explain." Holt's gaze swept the room before fixing on her. "These vessels were built 500 years ago. Weapons of the War of Seven Suns, a conflict you may recall. The Empress did recall. The war had been so destructive that multiple civilizations agreed to a mass disarmament afterward. Entire classes of weaponry were outlawed. And those ships, those phantoms, were thought lost, scrapped, or destroyed. They were destroyed, Xeris said sharply. I know this. I ordered it. Holt's mouth twitched. You ordered their destruction. You didn't watch it happen. A ripple of cold moved through the air. The image changed, showing the ships in deep cryodock, surrounded by skeletal construction frames. Machines, non-sentient, self-repairing drones swarmed over them, replacing hull plating, recharging ancient reactors, loading munitions. The timestamp in the corner of the projection was from a week ago. They'd been hidden in the Orion graveyard, Holt said softly. Maintained by autonomous systems, shielded from every sensor sweep, locked away until someone with the right access codes woke them up. And those codes? The Empress asked, her voice a little too even. Holt met her gaze without flinching. We have them. The room went utterly still. They are unmanned, the human continued, but each one is fully operational. They carry weapons your current fleet cannot defend against, weapons banned by every treaty your empire signed. You remember what those weapons can do. You remember the casualty lists. Xeris did remember. Entire star systems burned to ash. Worlds cracked like glass. The war had been a stain on her dynasty's history, and the disarmament afterward had been her great-grandfather's attempt to cleanse it. Holt let the silence stretch before saying, we call them the 3,000 ghosts. They've waited centuries for a reason to return. And now. He didn't finish the sentence. He didn't have to. The nobles shifted uneasily. Admirals whispered to aides. Even the ever-serene chancellor looked pale. Xeris straightened, her silks whispering against the crystal seat. So this is your threat? To unleash the ghosts of the past on my empire? It is not a threat, Holt said. It is knowledge. We simply wanted you to know they're awake. The phrasing was deliberate, and it landed like a blade against the Empress's composure. There was no list of demands, no ultimatums. Just the awareness that somewhere, not so far from her borders, 3,000 warships of nightmare design now floated, invisible to her sensors, untouchable by her laws, answerable only to human command. For a long moment, Xeris did not speak. She studied Holt's face, the impenetrable calm of the human delegation, the flicker of unease in her own court. She realized then that her empire's strength, its unchallenged dominance, had been dented in ways not visible to the eye. Because power was not only in weapons. It was in what people believed about who held them. And right now, the belief in her empire's invincibility had just cracked. She leaned back into her throne, hiding the faintest tremor in her hands beneath folds of silk. You may leave, she said at last. Holt gave a slight bow. We will be in touch. As they departed, the hologram flickered and vanished. The chamber felt emptier without it, yet the shadow of those ships lingered, as if they were still there, watching. When the doors closed, the Empress exhaled slowly. Her admirals erupted in whispers, plans for immediate fleet deployments, urgent sensor sweeps, covert operations to find and destroy the ghosts. She silenced them with a raised hand. In her mind, she could still see them, rows upon rows of ancient predators waiting in the dark. And in her bones, she knew one thing with absolute certainty: if humanity had the patience and cunning to hide them for centuries, then they had the will to use them. The Empress had not been threatened today. She had been reminded that some ghosts do not rest quietly. And now, she would have to decide whether to bury them again, or pray they never came calling. The trial was meant to be a spectacle. The Grand Plaza of the Calirian capital stretched for 2 kilometers, paved with black stone tiles etched in the glyphs of the Empire's victories. At its far end rose the throne dais, an elevated platform where Empress Avra's Vex awaited, flanked by 100 ceremonial guards in silver armor. Above the plaza, banners depicting the double spiral crest of Caliria snapped in the high winds. The crowd, numbering in the tens of thousands, roared as the prisoners were brought forth. 5 humans. Shackled, heads high, clothes torn from months in imperial cells. they were led to the platform by armed wardens. The Empress stood, her violet cloak pooling like liquid night. "Citizens of Killeria," she called, her voice amplified by sonic resonance until it seemed to vibrate in every chest, "you witness here the end of a nuisance. These creatures dared to trespass into our inner territories, spying, stealing, undermining the rightful dominion of the Empire." The crowd booed and hissed. "They will be sentenced, and their worlds will be reminded that resistance is suicide." The lead prisoner, Captain Mara Vance, met the Empress's gaze without flinching. "Your empire is a shadow about to be burned away," she said quietly. The Empress tilted her head. Brave words from someone about to be executed. Then the sky changed. It began as a faint shimmer above the plaza. Then a low vibration rolled through the air, rattling the banners, the stones, even the crystal spires of the surrounding city. The crowd fell into uneasy silence. From the horizon, massive shapes appeared, at first as pinpoints, then as silhouettes blotting out the stars. The first of the warships dropped from FTL with a flash of white light, followed by another, then 10, then 100. The air itself seemed to shudder under their mass. 3,000. In perfect formation, the fleet locked into geosynchronous orbit above the capital. Their hulls were matte black, their weapon arrays glowing with a cold, blue light. They bore no marking save one, a stylized human hand, palm forward. Alarms wailed from the defense towers. Imperial officers scrambled to their posts. The plaza erupted into chaos as civilians pointed, shouted, some falling to their knees. A voice cut across the commnet, overriding every channel. It came from the lead ship, HSS Resolute. "This is Admiral Kieran Holt of the Terran Defense Armada. Your Empress holds our people. You will release them immediately. If you do not, we will end this day with a war your empire will not survive." The Empress's eyes widened only slightly, but enough for her guards to notice. She gestured for the comlink. "Admiral Holt," she said, her tone steady, "you stand over the heart of the Killerian Empire. Any act of aggression will be met with annihilation." The Admiral's reply was cold. "Annihilation is the business of the 3,000 ships you see above you. Everyone is armed with planetary siege weapons, capable of destroying your military infrastructure in minutes. We have chosen not to fire. Yet." On the horizon, the flagship's forward batteries charged. The glow was visible even from the plaza. "This is your only warning," Holt continued. "Release our people. Stand down your fleets. And we will speak as equals." The Empress glanced at her generals, who stood pale and rigid. She knew the truth, her forces were scattered across dozens of campaigns. The home fleet was strong, but not strong enough to stop this armada before it leveled the capital. She turned back to Captain Vance. "This was your plan?" Vance's chains clinked as she lifted her chin. "No. This was our answer." In orbit, the HSS Resolute fired. Not at the city, but at a massive asteroid fortress on the edge of the system. The beam struck, and the fortress dissolved into incandescent debris in seconds. The message was unmistakable: "This is what we can do." Gasps swept the crowd. Even the Empress's guards shifted uncomfortably. Her composure slipped for the briefest moment. She felt the pressure of history shifting against her. For centuries, Killeria had been the unchallenged master of the galaxy. Now, in the span of minutes, the myth of invincibility had been cracked, and the crack was widening. "Release them," she said at last, her voice low. The guards hesitated. "I said release them." The human's chains fell away. Vance stepped forward, standing tall beside the Empress. "You'll remember this day," she said. "Because it's the last time you will ever see humanity as prey." Above, the Terran fleet shifted into a defensive halo, weapons still trained on the capital. The message was clear: they could leave now, but they would be watching. The humans departed the plaza aboard a shuttle that rose into the night, streaking toward the fleet like a spark joining a storm. The Empress remained on her throne, staring up at the sky. She knew that in every corner of her empire, whispers were already spreading, whispers that the humans had faced her at the height of her power and walked away alive. And in the quiet recess of her mind, She wondered whether she had just seen the first act of the last war her empire would ever fight.